You're all a bunch of fucking assholes. You know why? You don't have the guts to be what you want to be. You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
Welcome back everybody to Keating K TV. When it comes to the most iconic duo in combat sports history, the Diaz brothers are going to be one of the first names that people will throw out there. Their brash and outspoken behavior is what made them fan favorites in the sport of MMA. Out of the brothers, Nate is currently the active fighter, whereas his older brother Nick has been inactive since his fight with Anderson Silva back in 2015. So in today's video, we will be taking a closer look at the 5 most iconic Nate Diaz moments. But before we get into all of that, let's take a closer look at how it all began for Nate Diaz. The beginning of the Nate Diaz story is tied with his older brother Nick. When Nick was 16 years old, he dropped out of school and decided that he wanted to train in martial arts. Inspired by the great Royce Gracie, Nick decided to train under Steve Heath, his first MMA coach. After learning that his coach was a Cesar Gracie student, Nick then went on to join Cesar Gracie's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu team, starting to train under that discipline also. By this point, Nate was 13 years old and also stopped attending school. However, he did not join his older brother in his martial arts journey and was just hanging around with his friends, not knowing what he wanted to do in life. One day, Nate got into a fight at school and was suspended for it. Nick, hearing this, decided to go there and instructed Nate to join the gym as well, not wanting his younger brother to get mixed up with the wrong crowd. They ended up going to the jiu-jitsu team and Nate fell in love with the sport. From that moment on, his journey in becoming one of the elite level MMA fighters began, all while following in his older brother's footsteps.
That dude talked a lot of shit to you.
Yeah, I'm not making. He got in my head, and he got me. Yeah, absolutely.
They wanna bury me and worry. I'm losing my mind. Look down the barrel of my 9 and my missus.
When it comes to the Diaz brothers, they're not in a fight game to make friends, but to fight. So back at UFC 137, when Donald Cerrone wanted to introduce himself and shake Nate's hand, Nate slapped his hand away, and that's when the bad blood started. So when their fight was scheduled and whenever they got the chance to face off with one another, the intensity became palpable. At the weigh-ins, Nate happened to miss weight by a pound, and Cerrone could care less, telling Dana that he's fine with it, and the fight was scheduled to happen. During the fight, we saw rather uncharacteristic behavior from Cowboy, as he immediately came forward, bringing the fight to Diaz. Normally, Cerrone likes to take his time to get into the fight, but not with this one. This cost him ring generalship, and he ended up with his back up against the cage, where Nate Diaz seemingly did not let go of him ever since. Continuously taking advantage of Donald Cerrone's upright and open defense, Diaz was able to consistently tag Cerrone with straight punches over Cerrone's slower round punches. Not letting Cerrone off the hook for the entirety of the fight, Diaz kept on pressuring Cerrone and made him drown under the pressure. And by the end of it, Nate secured a judge's decision victory.
I grew chicken, I grew up a fucking screw up. Got introduced to the game, got an ounce and fucking blew up. Chopping rocks.
Coming in at number 4, we have Nate winning The Ultimate Fighter Season 5. Nate Diaz is somebody who likes to keep himself to himself. So when the offer came from The Ultimate Fighter, Diaz didn't want any part of it. His older brother Nick and Cesar Gracie convinced Nate to go into the show just to get his medicals done.
They just go in there, they pay for your medicals.
And so he did. But one thing led to another, and Nate was already on the show and facing off for his first fight. His first fight came in against Rob Emerson, somebody who Nate already had some problems with when Rob Emerson decided to write "Suck It, Team Pulver" on the house's wall. Nate, not taking lightly to this, had a run-in with Emerson at the house where things had escalated, but luckily no fight broke out. So in their fight, Diaz was struggling to get the fight to the ground in the first round, and the fight played out on the feet mostly. In the second round though, we saw Nate getting the fight to the mat, and after a couple of moments, we already saw Nate sinking in a rear naked choke, winning the first elimination round. Following that, Nate won a second fight on the show by another submission, defeating Corey Hill in the first round and securing his spot in the semifinals against future title contender Gray Maynard. In the fight, we saw total domination from Gray Maynard in the first round, where Gray was able to successfully land significant strikes and keep Diaz on the bottom. The following round, however, proved that Maynard had gassed himself out and Nate started to take over very rapidly, ending the fight by guillotine choke and moving on to the finals. In the finals, Nate went up against Manuel Gamburian, who was able to take down Diaz and keep him down for the entirety of the first round. In the opening moments of the second round, Gamburian popped a shoulder out of its socket when he went for a botched takedown attempt and had to tap out due to the pain. Diaz won the fight and thus became the Ultimate Fighter Season 5 winner.
They'll never take me alive. I'm getting high with my 4-5 cocked on me.
Closing in on the final 3 moments, at number 3 we have Melvin Guillard vs Nate Diaz. In typical Diaz fashion, he started off slow in the opening 10 seconds. However, Melvin was able to land a brutal right hand that was able to knock Diaz down. However, it was more so a flash knockdown, and Nate got back up right away and starting to pressure Melvin. Melvin, being able to land solid punches, was able to cut Diaz's right eye, but seemingly Diaz was not bothered by it and kept on pressuring Melvin regardless. In the second round, Diaz found his range and made Melvin shoot in on him for a takedown, with which he was able to trap Melvin in a guillotine choke and finish the fight in typical Diaz fashion, coming back after a shaky start to finish the fight strong. Coming in at number 2, we have Nate Diaz defeating Gray Maynard in their third and final fight. Arguably, Nate's best performance came in against Gray Maynard for the third time. In the Diaz-Maynard trilogy, we saw Nate Diaz getting the better of Gray in their first fight, submitting him, and then we saw Gray Maynard defeating Nate Diaz by decision in their rematch. So when they were scheduled to fight again for the last time on the Ultimate Fighter Season 18 finale, it was time to settle the score. From the moment the fight started, we saw Nate being very smart, staying on the outside and utilizing his range, immediately meeting Maynard as he's coming in with a left hand down the middle. However, this did not discourage Maynard and he kept on pressuring Nate. Being backed up against the cage, Nate landed a beautiful Haragoshi throw, and from there, the end was near. The same way, Nate was able to slip in his left when Maynard came in on him in the opening moments of the fight, catching Maynard as he was closing in on him with a left hand, which rocked Maynard very badly, and he was just never able to recover from it. Arguably, we saw the most iconic Nate Diaz beatdown in all of his career, continuously loading up on bombs and landing on Maynard over and over again. Maynard's toughness kept him up, but it was clear that he was already out on his feet, hereby ending the trilogy without any dispute in Nate Diaz's favor.
Got some static with some niggas on the other side of town. Then my little cousin K-Roll, he's a rider now.
Here is an honorable mention: Nate Diaz vs Kurt Pellegrino. This moment in Nate's career would have been the most iconic image that you can find of him, only if it weren't for the number 1 spot in this video. In the fight against Kurt Pellegrino, we saw Nate getting easily taken down by the more experienced wrestler for 2 rounds straight. It was also another fight where we saw Nate land yet another Haragoshi that was then followed up by the finishing sequence of the fight. We saw Kurt picking up Nate in the air, and on his way down, Nate pushed himself off of the cage and made Kurt lose his balance, and he was in the perfect position to be set up for a triangle choke. Nate sees the opportunity and steps on the choke, and knowing it was tight, he went ahead and started to flex his biceps, flip the bird, and celebrated early, submitting Kurt in the second round with yet another comeback submission. Seemingly, this is like a running theme for Nate Diaz victories. Coming in at number 1, and how can we ever forget about this, the upset against Conor McGregor. The most iconic moment in his career when he came in and defeated Conor McGregor on only 11 days notice. In the fight, we saw Conor McGregor unloading shots at Nate Diaz, but Diaz was not fazed by it and kept on pressuring Conor, walking through his punches and making Conor back up. So in the second round, it was clear that Conor was out of stamina and it was all coming to an end for him. After landing a beautiful 1-2, Diaz was able to stun Conor and make him shoot him for a takedown. Following a couple grappling sequences, Nate had the mount on Conor, landing a couple punches on him. Conor turned his back. Nate Diaz seizes the moment as he always does and choked him out in one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. Being counted out by many, Diaz had these iconic words to say that became legendary.
How's that feel? Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
And with these moments, we will be concluding the most iconic moments in Nate Diaz's storied career. Did I leave any moments out? Be sure to write them down in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. As always, I have been Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.